Hello and welcome to my Violence in Video Games presentation by Brandon Sanchez. So first, what are video games? Video games are games that we can play electronically. They're usually found on gaming consoles or computers. We can trace video games back to the 1970s, uh, where the first game created was Pong. Video games are a hobby that people have to pass the time, and in the recent times, it has become a career for some people. People have been using video games to create content, live stream, and people even compete professionally in esports. Okay, so how does violence connect with video games? Well, the genre of violent video games has always been a thing since the 1980s. There are different types of video games categorized by ratings. There's also, different genres. The ones that the media is more focused on is on the ones rated teen, mature, and sometimes adult only. But in order to buy adult only games, you have to be 21 years old, so they're not really um, controversial in the media. The ones that are teen and mature, and these usually deal with extreme violence, drug usage, sexual intercourse. They're just meant for mature people. Um, Violent video games have existed way back when, ever since the beginning, around the 80s. Now, the rise of first person shooters and super violent games like franchises such as Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, and extremely violent fighting games such as Mortal Kombat. The market for violent video games have risen, and there's just so many video games. Um, so video games have been attributed to school shootings and mass shootings. I'm guessing this because over half of the teenage population plays video games, and violence has been in media, not just video games, like movies, songs, TV shows, I mean, even books. And video games have been picked out single-handedly and used as a scapegoat to try to explain why mass shootings are happening and why people are more violent and aggressive. Well, ever since the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting, there have been over 2,400 mass shootings in America alone, which is crazy. That's insane. Um, there are politicians out there blaming school shootings and mass shootings on video games. Even President Donald Trump has blamed video games and their violence on uh, school shootings. And the negativity surrounding video games makes people anxious and nervous. It makes gamers or teenage gamers feel targeted for something they didn't do or cause. A simple hobby that teenagers do to pass the time or have fun is being targeted and being used to shift the blame for mass shootings, but more school shootings. There are different groups of people who blame mass shootings on video games. They're like politicians, the older generations of people, like the boomers, but there are also, adults, young adults who believe this as well. They use video games and the video game culture as a scapegoat to as the increase of violence in America. But the gamers feel differently. They feel like they're being attacked by these groups of people. It is pretty understandable that the gamers would be upset because seeing how the group of people are just taking the gamers and generalizing them and representing them as violent and aggressive people. It's not cool. And not all video games are violent. There's other peaceful, calming video games. Not everything's violent. There's educational video games, like I said before, calming video games. They provide, an escape of reality for many fans. Um, the gamers and the other groups of people, not just gamers, have given other reasons as to why there's increase of violence and aggression, and they have tried to show that the gun control situation in the United States isn't the best, and that shooters have access to guns quite easily. They also say that the mental health issues with some of the shooters are just not right. They're not right in the head. They're also targeting groups of people, like they're racist, and they sometimes target people based on their race, their gender, their religion, their sexuality. But a different viewpoint, the military, they kind of stay neutral in this discussion. They're not really saying anything. They just use video games to help soldiers or people get interested in the military. It's rarely used to train soldiers. I couldn't find any solid sources, but I have seen pictures and like snippets of articles mentioning that video games have been used to train people. Okay, so the CST example that is being violated in this topic is solidarity, and here's why. There is a clear problem of hate in the world. These shootings happen and people jump the gun, blame gamers and video games, and the glorified violence that video games bring to the table. While there is violence in video games, it's pretty unfair, and there is constant bickering and arguing about why these shooters are attacking mass amounts of people. But one of the underlying causes that causes people to shoot up schools and groups of people and just people in general are just because these people genuinely hate others or are very racist or xenophobic. For example, the Orlando nightclub shooting, there were no links to video games as one of the motivations to shoot up this nightclub, but it was a gay nightclub, and it was the largest attack on LGBTQ in like the history of everything. And what about the Charlton Church shooting? The shooter was targeting African American people simply because he was racist and did not like African Americans. This leads back to solidarity. Solidarity is a Catholic social teaching that proclaims that we are all one human family, and it doesn't matter what our differences are. We should still love each other no matter our differences, and it would be great to link video games and the violence and like that whole situation to solidarity. The church does not have a direct statement about video games, but there are some Bible verses out there that do describe certain situations like video games. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 18 to 20, it is interpreted that video games could be enjoyed because video games are another one of God's creations. And in Psalm chapter 90, verse 12, video games can apply to this verse as well, saying that video games are a distraction in the world and are used to express emotion and feeling. What is pretty cool though is that the Vatican had a Minecraft server. Um, Father Robert Balissiere, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, created a Minecraft server in hopes to connect gaming Catholics around the world in this one game, which is pretty cool. Minecraft is a sandbox type of game where you're free to survive in the wild and build. And this father made a Vatican Catholic Minecraft server, and that was pretty cool. Okay, so the recommended piece of media, there's not really that many books or movies to like watch on this type of topic, but I would recommend checking out video games, like even little, like video games are pretty expensive, like $60 most of the time. So I would suggest that you check out a non-violent video game and a violent video game to compare and contrast to see like to open your eyes and have a new perspective on what people are talking about, and you can use your experience to open your perspective. Okay, my thoughts and comments. I'm a gamer myself, and I worry that my hobby would be attacked and regulated and stuff in the future. There are a lot of teenagers out there like me who play video games, and like shifting more towards the mass shootings carried out by teenagers or young adults. I could see where the older generation assumes that video games cause violence. Video games are getting realistic every year, more realistic every year, and the violence can get extreme from time to time in different games. Um, if there was someone who didn't follow video games and heard that politicians rambling about how video games cause violence, I would probably believe them, maybe like search up on Google violent video games and see what it's all about and see that yes, video games are violent and they are pretty glorified nowadays, but violence is glorified in all types of media like movies and TV shows. and sometimes they're even worse. Um, I kind of feel like the older people don't get it at all. If video games were causing shootings, wouldn't there be an increased number of shootings? There are first person shooting video games that come out every year, and like wouldn't be wouldn't more people just go out and commit these shootings? Uh yeah, no, I don't really think so. And after I play a violent video game myself, I don't feel inspired to go cause violence in my neighborhood or shoot up anything. And I think the underlying cause of these shootings is mental health issues that the shooters usually face, and that they're just racist people out there who want to target others, and it's just not all about video games. And that is the end of my